This is Left Voices for Thursday, February 27th, 2014. I'm Andrea Sears. Tonight,
we know in the United States, at least within the Department of Justice, there has been no will to really take these cases forward, and that is why the French citizens have turned to their own courts, which has been thus far very willing to investigate this case.
A French judge may subpoena a U.S. general in a torture investigation. Former Guantanamo detainees are urging a French judge to subpoena a former commander of the U.S. detention facility to explain his role in their torture. In 2005, a judge of the High Court of Paris opened a criminal investigation of alleged human rights abuses and war crimes at Guantanamo committed against 3 French citizens who'd been imprisoned there. Major General Geoffrey Miller, now retired, ran the prison in 2002 and 2003. In support of the subpoena, the New York-based Center for Constitutional Rights and the Berlin-based European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights have submitted a joint expert opinion on Miller's criminal responsibility for detainee treatment while he was commander. The 14-page report details acts of torture and other war crimes committed against detainees during 2002 to 2004. Katherine Gallagher is a senior staff attorney at CCR and co-author of that report.
The investigating magistrate has been collecting evidence over the years of what happened to the men and has been trying to get more information about what the U.S. knew and did in Guantanamo. The judge had sent a request to the United States in January 2012 to visit Guantanamo and to receive more documents. And to date, the United States has not responded to that request. Now, Geoffrey Miller was the commander of Guantanamo during at least 2 years of the time that these men were detained. And it is believed that he, as a person who was very directly involved with policies and practices around interrogations and authorized certain techniques to be used, that he will have a lot of information for the judge on what happened in Guantanamo between 2002 and 2004. And indeed, we believe that not only will he be able to provide her with information, but we think that that information will also shed light on his role in the allegations of torture, and that he will be more than a witness, but indeed should be viewed as a suspect in this case.
Doesn't that open up the possibility of self-incrimination through his testimony?
Well, certainly he could have an attorney present with him to advise him during that testimony, and that is certainly something, again, depending on the next stages that come, which we hope would be a subpoena, and he could have a lawyer present, and then he could also claim that he won't cooperate. But there are many, many unanswered questions, and I think let's first get to the first stage of whether he will show up and what information he will share. Geoffrey Miller has appeared in the past before the U.S. Congress and put forward information, and even that information, which he was willing to put forward in that venue, we believe sheds a lot of light on his role and responsibility, whether he views that as self-incriminating or whether he will put forward a defense to why certain actions were taken. Again, all of that is to be seen.
The interrogation techniques Geoffrey Miller was in charge of implementing at Guantanamo were approved by the Office of Legal Counsel, approved by the President himself, approved by the Secretary of Defense. What was his specific role, Geoffrey Miller's specific role in implementing? How much control did he have over that?
He had quite a bit of control. Again, he was the commander on the ground in Guantanamo, overseeing that detention site on a daily basis. And he had a direct role in how investigations would be conducted, on authorizing whether techniques would be used. And he has signed off on the use of interrogation techniques that go beyond the line of what has always been viewed as permissible interrogation techniques. In the expert report that we put forward, we detail the interrogation of Mohammed al-Qahtani, who was interrogated over a 48-day period of time. In that time, he was interrogated for up to 20 hours a day. He was subjected to various forms of physical and psychological torture, including forced nudity, sexual humiliation, religious humiliation. And that was something that occurred under the control of Geoffrey Miller. He's not simply a cog in the wheel. He was the commander at Guantanamo. And if he chooses to invoke a defense of, I was only following orders, under international law and under U.S. law, that is not a defense to liability. It may be a mitigating factor, but you also have an obligation not to carry out an unlawful order.
Geoffrey Miller was not only involved in Guantanamo, he was later transferred to Iraq, where he ran the interrogation program at all the prisons, including Abu Ghraib. He's credited with having, quote-unquote, Gitmoized interrogations at Abu Ghraib. What was the difference between Guantanamo and the prison system in Iraq? Why is that a significant difference?
One of the significant differences between Iraq and Guantanamo is that U.S. policy always recognized that the Geneva Conventions apply in Iraq. It wasn't just, hey, we'll try and stick as closely as we can to the Geneva Conventions, but they applied it in full force in Iraq, and the U.S. recognized that. So that put checks on interrogation techniques that seriously unfortunately, were absent in the early years at Guantanamo and in black sites around the world. And indeed, Geoffrey Miller traveled in the summer of 2003 to Iraq. This was the time that the insurgency was really moving forward, and it said, we've got to change our techniques here to get more actionable intelligence. And that's when we saw in the subsequent months what we later saw out of Abu Ghraib.
Is this being pursued under a doctrine of universal jurisdiction?
It is a certain form of universal jurisdiction because the defendant, whoever the defendants may be in this case, don't have to be present in France. It's enough that the victims are French, and that is part of France's domestic law to implement its obligations under the Convention Against Torture, to punish torturers wherever they may have committed the crime and wherever they may have been from. And so that is indeed a principle of universal jurisdiction.
What is the purpose of this investigation in France, and what do the victims hope to get out of this?
This is a criminal case, and so what they would like is to have those individuals who bear criminal responsibility for their ill treatment, for their torture, to be held accountable and to get answers about what happened. There's a tremendous amount of information in the public domain through UN reports, through many, many U.S. government reports. But when it comes to accountability, we are very much lacking. And we know in the United States, at least within the Department of Justice, there has been no will to really take these cases forward. And that is why the French citizens have turned to their own courts, which has been thus far very willing to investigate this case. And we hope will be responsive to our urging that it subpoena Geoffrey Miller.
And what is the stage of this investigation now? What's the current status of the whole process?
From our understanding, the appeals court affirmed the jurisdiction of the French court over this case already back in June 2005. And in the intervening years, the investigating judge took evidence from certain sources, including the plaintiffs themselves, and then shifted attention to the United States to try and get some cooperation there, and it has yet to get that. So where the investigating judge decides to go next, whether she will seek out information about more individuals, whether she will seek out more cooperation from the U.S. government itself, and hope that maybe there will be some more willingness to cooperate in this investigation 2 years on, that all remains to be seen. But I think what is hopefully clear and hopefully correct is that the judge won't be willing to drop this case because there are French victims of torture, just as there are many other victims of torture around the globe who've yet to have any measure of justice for what happened to them.
Katherine Gallagher is a senior staff attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights and vice president of the International Federation for Human Rights. This has been Left Voices for Thursday, February 27, 2014. Join us again tomorrow for more news and information from a progressive perspective. I'm Andrea Sears for leftvoices.net.